Welcome back to Vintage Super League. I am joined by our champion and thus the luckiest man in the universe, Luis Scott Vargas. Luis, how does it feel to finally win something?
It feels pretty good. I actually, I mean, I lost in the finals of the first Vintage Super League, and still very much remember that. Steve kind of destroyed me, and I was hoping. I was certainly very happy to win. You know, this was a pretty tough last 2 weeks. Like, went to match 5 against Rich Shea. It was very close matches. Thought I was doing pretty well against Webb here until Dredge did what Dredge does, which is generally not emerge with a match win.
You conveniently skipped the intense 5-game match you played, where you got to showcase really how lucky you can be in the semifinals.
Yeah, the thing is about our match is.
Oh yeah, that was against me, right?
That was the match of those 3 I would have been like least unhappy to lose, because we were just playing like sweet blue cards, and like I defeated you in the last time we met in the semis. Like, turnabout is fair play, so I would have been all right.
Didn't I beat you? It was three matches to 0. It was kind of a bloodbath. You might have forgotten.
Oh, we played in the semis three
we played in the
now.
Semis every single season, but
yeah,
I like your. Like when someone tries to rules lawyer me in a Grand Prix without knowing the rules. I do like when someone tries to humble brag incorrectly.
Yeah, basically, I just forgot that in every real season that we've played in the semis, since obviously season 3 doesn't count. Nor is Randy listening right now.
Nor is he making laughing and har marks and telling us how much he hates us.
Yes,
none of that is happening.
But yeah, going into this week, I remember even before we played our match, you're like, hey, do you think Webb would agree to these same rules, regardless of which one of us wins? I was just like, yeah, right.
That was a joke. You knew it was a joke. Yeah, that was pretty sweet. And
I texted Webb, like, after our match done, so Webb, no shops, no bazaars, and he just responded with, like, lol. and that was basically it. Like,
he kind of punished you by not agreeing to the no bazaar club, though. So that's our next question. Do you regret it?
Do I regret playing Dredge? Yeah.
I mean, we already know the answer, as everyone has regretted it who has ever played Dredge.
Okay, to be fair, I almost won game 2 through double cage containment freeze. If you could see the last, you were doing commentary on that match, right? So you could see like
on a lot of matches.
Yeah, the last couple turns, I just digging to find Barbarian Ring, which could kill Containment Priest, and because of the way the Landstill deck works, it can't actually beat like 6 zombies like very easily. It doesn't have a Tinker or a Time Vault or even like something a little bigger than that. It doesn't even have like probably Supreme Verdict or Balance. I guess I don't know.
He had multiple Supreme Verdicts. They were still in his deck after sideboard in match 4.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, that's a thing. Yeah. But either way, if I found that Barbarian Ring, even in the last turn, if I had found it, I actually would have potentially been able to win that game. But then I didn't, and I mulled a 1, and that was basically not very close.
Yeah. When Dredge gets to keep the 7-card hand, like, your draw was good in game 2 for the
it was quite
3
good.
hate cards, though, is that's rough.
Well, part of it was I didn't know which hate cards he had.
Yeah.
And so I had a Wispmare for Rest in Peace, and he played Cage, and I didn't
Rest in Peace in his deck too, by the way.
All right, so my assumption that Webb would assume that I would not play Dredge, definitely not true. He just he came loaded for Dredge in one of his decks.
Yeah, that was pretty sweet. When Randy was reporting, because we couldn't see we didn't have webcam, literally.
Like
we didn't have
webcam.
Webb's webcam. But Randy was letting us know that Webb has brought in 3 Grafdigger's Gates. He's like, and 3 Containment Priests and Rest in Peace. Just like, what? This is nuts. I mean, I don't know exactly what he had in his sideboard. How much anti-storm. Like, I think he just didn't have Arcane Labs, or just didn't have all the shops to hate, which is an interesting way to go. Like, definitely a big part of your range has to be Oath, which those cards are quite good against as well. So
yeah, so
Dredge is not a big part of your range, though. You actually went pretty far off the radar. That is not a deck I would ever put you on playing, and probably never again after this.
I learned my lesson. So yeah, it was pretty interesting because in the metagame where your opponent's going to be on the play and they know they're going to be on the play, it's kind of interesting because both Shops and Storm have a pretty strong argument for being a good deck on the play. Yeah. And so I ended up playing, Shops first because with the theory that it's not really exploitable because it's a dog against Storm on the draw, but overall, it's still, I think, a favorite. Even on the draw, I would choose to play Shops against Storm, and against other Shops decks. The fact that you're on the draw is actually not that big of a deal because so few of your sphere effects really affect the other person.
Yeah, the order of the decks definitely played a pretty big role in how things worked out. Let's say Webb flip-flops his first and third deck and gets to lead on Landstill against Workshops where he's on the play, and he's probably looking pretty good there. And then potentially being Storm on the play against Dredge is looking pretty good there, and the match is kind of completely different. But if you're going to put him on 3 decks, which we kind of assumed were going to be Storm, Shops, and probably a blue deck, although another Shops deck was certainly within the range, that if you had to pick the order, you'd say Storm is first. Like, it's to be on the play. That's where you want it the most, and Shops definitely has the most versatility on the draw against a range of decks.
Yeah, and part of the reason I chose to play Landstill second was I thought that I was the least favored in the first match because any deck on the draw is still not going to do great, especially if I get to guess wrong. And I think Landstill's a lot better on the play just because the card Standstill obviously is so good on the play.
Right. The really crazy thing, Game 3, Webb on the play with his Standstill deck went Land, Mox, Top, Standstill, and you played Bizarre Baghdad.
Yeah, that was kind of
the literal best hand you could ever have against any deck in the format except for Bizarre Baghdad. But,
so that was pretty good. I ended up defeating his Storm deck like Mold to 5 and 6, and I just played cards that Workshop deck has in its deck, so he couldn't win. I mean, that was basically it. Like, you could exchange any of the cards I cast for any of the other cards in the deck pretty much, and it would have done the trick. And then defeated his Shops deck in a pretty close matchup, though I actually lost game 1 because of my own Standstill. I played Standstill with a Wasteland, and he just ended up having Factory.
Yeah, that was definitely a crazy game where I'm not sure what his opening hand was because his turn 1 was Mox Factory Go on the play.
Yeah.
Which is just a very bizarre hand for Shops, and we didn't have again the hand cam. So it's like, what did he keep? Did he end up keeping like Factory, Wasteland, Mox, like Steel Colossus? Like I have no idea. I guess the world may never know. But I know what the world is wondering right now. You picked up your 6th Pro Tour top 8 earlier this year. You got a 2nd and 3rd in VSL. You've got your first child on the way. But winning VSL, how much better is that than all the other things you've achieved in your lifetime?
Well, basically the main motivation is that next time I'm in a position to play in the playoffs, or maybe even just have my face somewhere on the VSL opening screen, it'll say VSL champion instead of burrito enthusiast.
It won't, because I have a lot of control over that, and there's no chance of that happening. But it is really cool that you think that there's a chance that might happen.
Well, there goes my motivation.
We can just put an asterisk. We'll just put burrito enthusiast asterisk champion.
Yeah. It was an interesting match. Like we talked about, in the last couple weeks, the most interesting part of this playoff structure, which I do think is very good, by the way, is what do you pick deck 4? Because deck 4, or match 4 rather, you've seen the other person's 3 decks, and you then have to figure out not only what you think is good against those decks overall, but like what they'll pick and why.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you had told me that you're pretty sure that if you had to put Webb on a deck, you'd think that he's probably going to go with Landstill on the draw and, kind of shore up the matchups as much as possible. And the way that you could be least exploited is play your own Landstill deck, especially with 2 copies of Decree of Justice, which didn't end up being overly relevant, although it certainly could have been. The card looked like it was really going to be fantastic.
Yeah, basically, if I chose to play Dredge and he chose to play Landstill, that would be a disaster for me, and he knew that. So by playing Landstill, he already basically
your game 1 is basically a bye, but
yeah, by games 2, I'm probably a low enough percentage. I think he's a favorite overall by a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but
yeah, it can't be a lot actually, given that I'm like above 90% game 1. But but if I play Workshops and he plays Landstill, I don't know his Landstill deck. What if he has 7 or 8 anti-Shops cards, which my deck did? I had like 3 Fluxes, Disenchant, Kataki, Steel Sabotages. So given that I had potentially 2 bad matchups in his Landstill deck, and it seemed pretty tough for him to choose Storm, given that he didn't think I was going to play Dredge because of his Landstill deck. I think he could assume that. If I chose Shops instead of Landstill and he chose Storm, if he's Storm on the draw against Shops, he's just never going to win. So
Randy also pointed out his Shops deck had 9 anti-Dredge sideboard cards. So
well, there we go. So Yeah, I really thought he was the most likely to play Landstill, and because the Landstill deck I was playing had 2 decrees, I thought I could really get Webb. Because look, I know people who don't like to break standstills. Webb is pretty high on that list of people who will not break a standstill. And if we just sit there and then I cycle a decree for 3 or something, then all of a sudden he's just like, whoops, like the game just completely changes. So.
And we now have scrolling on the bottom. Congrats to LSV Burrito Enthusiast, which
I could see that.
You've been that for a solid 30+ years at this point, so finally getting the recognition you deserve in that category. My personal opinion is that you are the best vintage player in the world, so it is pretty awesome to see you. That's dead serious. I think you're the best vintage player in the world. If I had to pick someone to defeat an alien race in a match of vintage, I would first pick first pack Luis Scott Vargas, but. Yeah, it's pretty awesome to see you actually take the crown down, and you've obviously put up insane numbers year after year after year, which is basically season after season. We've only been doing this for not that long, but
it's going on like almost 3 years now. So it's a pretty long time, right? I
think it's like a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah, this is our third year.
Oh, is it the third year already? Okay.
We started at the end of 2014 or something like that, or mid 2014. So. It's pretty cool. VSL has dominated my Tuesday nights for a long time. I very much enjoy it. I hope to continue battling, and I think that's the plan. So,
yeah.
But I guess if this was the last VSL, I'd be the last champion. So, I hope I didn't jinx us. I definitely want to play another season, and many more seasons after that. Which actually leads us to our next point, which is the relegation tournament, which we're going to have to figure out pretty soon here.
Yeah, that should be interesting. A solid 98% of the league will be competing in the relegation tournament to try to determine the final 12 spots of VSL Season 5.
We could have a very different looking league next season based on how the rules work, because basically there's an 8-player tournament, and as many people from the league as have a tied for last record get entered into that tournament. Yeah. So we have 4 people in the leagues in the tournament right now?
5.
5?
Jeez. That would be everyone but you, me,
everyone but
Webb,
Randy,
Richey, and Randy.
Yeah, everyone but Randy plus the top 4.
It is a large potential relegation tournament where hopefully we'll get some awesome players back. Hopefully, we'll see what David Williams' schedule is, and Nick Detweiler, who got second in the play-in tournament, and Josh Utter-Layton, and a lot of great players who have expressed interest and have played in VSL in the past. So we'll hopefully get them involved as much as possible. Of course, we have the Asian Vintage.
The Asia Vintage Championship.
And that'll actually be our next broadcast. That'll be 2 weeks from tonight, and expect to see myself and Luis Scott Vargas and Randy Bueller and hopefully some other members of the league doing some commentary that's going to be broadcast in Japanese, and then we're going to go over some of the videos and talk about the matches and have some English commentary as well. So Vintage is great to watch. It's great to commentate on, and it's just a lot of fun. So hopefully a lot of you will be able to tune in and check that out as well.
We're going to have our own Steve Menendian is going to be competing. He's flying over. There's currently a Vintage Super League email thread discussing his deck list. He's the representative of the Vintage Super League after all. And there's also a number of notable Japanese players playing in the Vintage Asia Vintage Championship, and I'm really excited to see a high stakes paper Vintage tournament. So it's going to be really cool, including a former Vintage world champion as well, and a number 2. So I guess multiple former Vintage world champions are going to be playing in the tournament. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be awesome. I mean, watching any Vintage is going to be great, but you have those Vintage champions. You have Shuei Nakamura, Shada Yakasuka, who are both Hall of Famers and 2 of the very best players to have ever played Magic. Period. It's just a stacked field playing the best format that you can play, and that's going to be exciting to watch. I mean, we had a great season here. Of course, 10 great players. We had Randy doing the production. We can all agree. Randy doing the production side tonight. Did a great job. Of course, Athena Huey taking care of production throughout the season. I think this was our best season other than the end. We didn't have a deserving champion for the first time. That's okay. We'll play it back. We'll run it back next season. We'll have potentially.
I just like the agreement we made. There were a lot more Notion Thieves and Mystic Remoras in deck lists than you're used to seeing.
Mystic Remora got paid for cumulative upkeep of 7. So That was about right.
It was a heinous mistake. But yeah, this is a great season. A lot of fun stuff happened. We're going to, if I were a betting man, which I very much am, we're going to see some action on the ban restricted list. I don't know what that'll be, but I would be very surprised if something didn't happen. And we'll see what it is, I guess, potentially before the next season, actually.
Yeah, that's awesome. Or we can just implement our own when we play each other in the semifinals for the 20th consecutive season.
Alrighty.
All right. Anything else you want to add before we throw this one away? I know you want to, shout out to luck, of course, but.
Yeah, you can't spell LSB without luck, and I guess there was some skill and definitely a lot of victory. So I guess that'll do it for me this season.
So it was in the correct order. Luck was definitely number one, a medium amount of skill, and definitely victories in the end. So Luis Scott Vargas is our champion of VSL Season 4. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. This was a ton of fun. To Puka Trade, to Wormwood, to all our sponsors, to everyone who's helped out, and to all the viewers. We appreciate it. Until next season.